I'm Dan Carlson, one quarter of us three blokes. I'm drinking some Mexican beer today, which I should have been doing last week when we watched Phantasm. And I am joined by
I'm John Cadolf, another quarter of us three blokes, and I've limited myself to 1 pint of of cheap wine today.
I am Dave Nesbitt, another quarter of us three blokes, and I am currently drinking two different things. But I'll start with Sam's strawberry mead. Um,
Ah,
my local specialty shop is now carrying meads, and I'm like, oh, okay, that'll work out.
sweet.
And then going hand in hand, there seems to be kind of a overall 70s theme happening here. This is more 60s, but it's a start. I've got myself a nice purple haze.
Yay!
Tasty blueberry stuff.
Very
he's
cool.
already got the stuff open, so he knows.
Ready to go.
Yeah, it's good. It's
Oh,
good.
Ready to go.
I got to be a couple of swallows into this, so to speak, to really get started.
And then
That's what she said.
Well done.
Sorry.
Hi there. I am the Mad Hat Cat. I am 25% of us three blokes, and we finally got all the math right. I think every single one of us did. Bam, 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 bam. Today, also like Dave, I've got two drinks. First, I'm starting with kombucha because I'm a real Californian. And second one is actually also a strawberry thing. It's a Shiner Strawberry Blonde.
Ooh, that's
But that'll be for later. That'll be for later.
Nice.
So, Dave, you chose this documentary, the Dogtown and Z Boys.
Yes. Dogtown and Z Boys got introduced to me by my dear friend Allison Casaccio. She had sat down and watched it and said, "This film is totally your sort of thing," and gave me her copy of it. And basically, it's a documentary about the birth of skateboarding in Southern California, and it's about. I was talking to Dan before everybody arrived about how sometimes things just line up perfectly for a moment in time to happen. Because it was the early 70s, you had a lot of kids who had a level of freedom that kids don't have at this, in this point in time, basically kind of out and free. And they were a combination of surfers who then also skateboarded to kind of keep doing street surfing. And along the way, at the same time, there was a major drought happening in Southern California at that point in time. So there were a lot of people who had empty pools. So they came up with this idea of going into the backyards of houses while people were at work and skating their pools. And that was kind of the birth of what would become modern skateboarding, because you look at like the skateboard competitions that were happening. And at first it was like slalom races and free skateboarding, which was kind of like, a flat surface and all of this. And it was, skating pools and doing stuff like that really introduced the world to the beginnings of what would become modern skateboarding.
I don't get the sense that they had more freedom so much as they wouldn't allow anyone to tell them to stay home.
Yeah.
They
These
took
are
their
definitely,
freedom.
everybody in here is a really, really strong personality. I mean,
That's a light way of putting it.
you look at some of these people and you realize that when they get to the end of the film and they talk about what everybody is now doing, and everybody has something to do with the sea or skateboarding or something like that. Like these people found their love in life very, very early on, and they kept rolling with it. Also, the guy who directed the film was a member of Z Boys, Stacy Peralta. He would also go on to form one of the most famous skateboard teams that there's ever been, called the Bones Brigade, who gave us Rodney Mullen and Steve Caballero and Tony Hawk. And I mean, like 80% of what we now think of as modern skateboarding pretty much came from stuff that was originated by members of the Bones Brigade.
Right. And I think it's interesting because, we're going to be saying the name Tony a lot. but not
Two different
necessarily.
Tonys.
Right, but we're not going to be referring to the ever known Tony Hawk. We're going to be
Right.
referring to Tony Alva.
This isn't the
Tony
Tony
Hawk
show.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't remember who they were talking to at the time. Like, look, if Tony showed up, like you were just kind of there along with Tony because it was the Tony show.
Yeah, that was Stacy
He
talking.
had the
about that.
ego.
Yeah. And
Amongst egos. Everyone has the ego.
he has an ego,
He's
but
the
Tony
highest of
was
the egos.
way up there.
Well, it's funny that you say, like we're going to be saying the name Tony a lot because there are two Tonys. I knew absolutely nothing about this documentary and
Me either.
nothing about skateboarding as like a subculture, as kind of a counterculture. Beyond, I didn't know anything. I'm not going to pretend. Like I'm trying to think. What did I know?
I knew
Tony Hawk had a
zero.
video game that I played when I was a kid, and I was really good at one move, and it was grinding on the pipe, and I could do nothing else.
the only thing I knew about skateboards before this is that I never had one. I couldn't ride one, and the only exposure I had to one was in the video game Paperboy when that kid with the skateboard comes flying out at you. I hated him.
Oh God, he would always fly out, and there was no way to dodge that little fucker. It was really irritating.
That was Tony.
That was Tony.
Yeah. I think that if somebody redoes Paperboy, they should introduce handguns.
We like that episode of Charlie's Angels that which was it Alva that made it into that episode of
It
Charlie's
was either
Angels?
Alva
No,
or
it was
Pearl.
that blonde kid.
I was gonna say I remember he had long straight blonde hair, and he was like one of the youngest of the Z Boys, but I don't remember which one it was off the top of my head.
I love that he has to explain to the guy in the middle of the street what the thing is.
Right? Like
There's
it's
exposition moments in that scene.
out, right?
Yeah.
It's like
It's a
a
skateboard.
surfboard. but
It's like
with
that.
wheels,
It's like
and
that
you
line
ride
in
it on
Dawn.
the street.
It's like that line in Dawn of the Dead when they're about to land in the shopping mall and they say, "What is it?" He's like, "I think it's one of those big indoor shopping malls."
Back in the day.
One moment, everyone, we have who is of the target demographic that is watching this. We have to explain to the elders
Oh yes.
what this very hip new thing is.
Well, in both cases, they were so new that there was probably a lot of people who didn't know what they were. Like,
Yeah.
that was like one of the first
That's
malls,
true.
and that probably was very early in the skateboarding fad, from what I could
Well,
tell.
it wasn't
Like,
a fad.
the whole-
because it's still going.
Well, at the time, it was okay. So it's not a fad anymore.
They thought it was going to be a fad.
It was a fad in the '60s, although.
Isn't that like
Yeah.
the hula hoop? Isn't that like the yo-yo?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
I
just one of
really-
the. Oh no! What's the one the bounce, the giant ball with the handle on it?
Oh,
That,
thing,
like,
yeah.
You know, it's the most dreaded thing for anyone
Yeah,
who
they
works
don't
in a
make-
toy store, because
they
there will always be some fucking kid who pulls it off the shelf and goes down the aisles, and their
Yeah.
parents just can't control them.
They don't make documentaries about that thing.
Well,
No.
they do.
Don't
You know,
encourage them, for fuck's sake.
I think that they do, but all the documentaries about that bouncy thing are on OnlyFans.
That is a movie. That is not this movie.
Yeah.
What was this movie again?
Oh yeah,
and Z Boys.
Dogtown and Z Boys.
Yeah.
Oh, I
So-
was gonna say I really like how this really gives that history. How it started out with surfing. And
Yeah, I
how-
actually never knew that that's like where it came out of
neither.
it, that marketing it as a sidewalk surfboard.
yeah.
I
and-
learned something new today.
And they went from surfing to skateboarding, because a lot of those, like the real private locals only surf areas, they couldn't get out on their surfboards, because if you weren't one of them, you couldn't go out and surf.
And
It's like you get
Locals
hurt,
only.
they throw rocks and glass at you.
That's
so
another documentary that Stacy Peralta did that at some point I'll bring up in here, called Riding Giants, which is
Yeah.
about riding massive waves. We're talking, standard big wave, 10 foot, 15 foot. Riding Giants, you start at about 30 feet and they go up to like 80 to 100 feet. And the front face of the
Like
wave
giant
is moving at
giants.
45 miles an hour. So if you wipe out, it's been nice knowing you.
Yeah.
You really have to know your shit.
Wow.
So Dave, so you've had a little bit of experience with skateboarding. Have you done any surfing? I can't. You were mentioning. Earlier.
I've not done any surfing. The thing that I discovered, though, a friend of mine pointed out, is that apparently there is actually a small kind of secret surf spot in, of all places, Sheboygan, Wisconsin.
What?
Yeah, it's an area that's probably about 100 yards wide, and about 3 or 4 times a year it produces front-facing waves that go to about 10 feet high, and then
Huh.
immediately people are all over it. But skateboarding was something that I, tried a bit in high school and a little bit when I was in college, and I got to the point where I could steer without dying. I learned how to do a basic kind of like ground level ollie, which is kind of like the jump move, and was able to land a kickflip a couple of times. And then I would see people who were like doing these insane kind of high action moves. I think I tried doing a pool dive once, hit the bottom of the pool, the whole goddamn board slid out from underneath me, and down I went.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Ouch.
But it's something that, to me, I love the culture of it, and I love the individuality and the overall drive that these people have, because it's like, it's the only thing we've got. It's what makes us different than anybody else. And when they were talking about the actual forming of the Zephyr team, like one of the guys goes, yeah, one of the Z-Boys was always with Z-Boys. You're always in that same uniform of blue Vans, Zephyr shirt, jeans, et cetera, and you stood out in the neighborhood. You were like the shit in the neighborhood, if you remember the Zephyr team. I think that sense of identity is kind of what drives those people as hard as they can.
And
The pool stuff really kind of piqued my interest. The whole idea of going into abandoned places and all that.
abandoned.
Kind of stuff.
Some of them were still occupied.
Like you're raiding somebody's house in the middle of the afternoon, but nobody's there. So it's abandoned.
No. I mean, I'm talking about the pools themselves. There were even like public pools that they absconded, and I mean, they didn't pick them up and ride off with them on their skateboards, but I mean, they were talking about how they even went to the point of draining them. 30,000 gallon pools.
Yeah.
and one was already filled in with dirt and stuff like that. And they dug it out just so that they could skate it. That's dedication. I don't know of anything that I'd have been willing to scavenge out like that.
For a couple of hours of entertainment.
Before the cops came,
Yeah. Well, while having a lookout on the roof, telling you.
Having a lookout on the roof to make sure, I love that entire thing of, because I use the word all the time, but you'd be sitting there, skating, everybody's having a good time, and then somebody would shout bail, and it'd be like watching teenagers scatter all over the place.
The way that they described it, and like finding the place, like prepping it to be used for skating, and like just how everybody was gathering together, and there was a little bit of like localism going on, but then also having somebody on lookout. It reminded me a lot of what I have heard about the rave scene in Britain. And how it was becoming the thing that it was a contagion amongst the children. And it just reminded me a lot of that whole like, fuck the man. We're going to congregate wherever the fuck we feel like it, and we're going to do this thing that we love, and nobody can tell us otherwise.
Yeah,
it's actually got to the point now in Britain where they're actually using the squatters' laws to be able to put together rave sites for 24-hour raves, and the police can't like fuck with them for 24 hours. And about 23 hours and 30, they are packing up their shit and leaving because they know the cops are going to come and raid them.
Yeah. Closest I ever got to that was when we were playing D&D all the time, and we would just go anywhere and play at Starbucks, the library. We in Somerset,
any place we could,
Yeah, we played in like this bank that had a like a conference room, and we would just go and sit in the conference room and play. Well, I mean, one year we even at Christmas time got there really early, right when they opened, and went in there, set up a Christmas tree, and there was like a little kitchen thing attached to it. I had like a roast going, and all kinds of stuff. We had like 2 huge tables. We had like 25 people. We had a white elephant gift thing, and we ran this little mini convention in a bank. So I mean, anywhere we could go that they wouldn't kick us out of, or at least wouldn't kick us out for a while, we would play D&D.
When you're watching Jay Adams go down a hill, and I mean, you're sitting there watching him speed up, and you're like,
Fuck.
if he hits the ground at that speed, he's going to leave behind most of his skin.
Yeah.
There's a level of confidence and adrenaline that he's got that, most human beings wouldn't be able to summon up at all.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
How close to that, to the back of that sheriff's cruiser did we get that one time when we were
All I'll say is that the next time that we did it, there was an anarchy flag and a pot sticker on the back of the sheriff's cruiser.
Again, the opinions of one member of us three blokes or two members are not necessarily.
I won't say that.
You want to make
what
it three?
happened. I won't say this is what happened. I will say
Four.
Speculating that we might have been all camoed up going out to a raid, and then we realized that one of the neighbors for our friend Bill Foreman was a sheriff's officer, and his car was still there. And where we were going, we had to go through his backyard. So we're allegedly sneaking past his home.
Allegedly.
He's
alleging against himself.
Yeah. So we might have left every now and again, we would leave a few stickers on there. And it took him like 3 months to realize that we had left like an anarchy sticker and a pot sticker on the back of his car. A lot of times when you're bored, you're going to come up with any kind of entertainment. And the further you can take it, and the more out there you can get, the more that it kind of serves both that need for a moment of adrenaline, and it also serves an idea of, hey, we did this thing. Hey, can we do the other thing? Let's do some more things.
I did like
It's always like building on the next one.
I did like the adaptive quality of saying, well, we can't surf, so let's find a way to surf on the sidewalk.
Yeah, and to me, I think that was the thing, is that it's that I think watching, especially if you watch this film, seeing the surf spot that they had in Venice, that is some expert ultimate level shit, because
Oh, you mean the little bitty spot with all the pier,
the
fallen
pier
pier
pilings
pieces.
and all of that.
God, that fucking footage of that one guy just slaloming through the fallen pier beams.
Oh
I was just
God.
It's like they talk about the idea of, this was the secret spot and it was really dangerous. And all of a sudden you hear the soundtrack in this film, by the way, is amazing. It is the sound of my early childhood.
Yeah.
And you hear
had to be expensive to get all the rights for this.
Oh,
That's kind of like thinking.
he basically gave up all the rights he attached the thing to a soundtrack, but in order for him the soundtrack to come out, he basically just gave away all the rights back to the bands. So he didn't see a dime for it, but goddamn if it didn't help to sell movies.
I was going to say it feels like and I don't mean this like I'm not putting it down, but it feels like a much cheaper movie than you'd expect to be able to legally have Pink Floyd's Us and Them in it.
Right.
Right.
There's like Led Zeppelin is on there, and Led Zeppelin is really expensive to put on a soundtrack. Trust me, I priced one of their songs.
And Roger doesn't just throw out the permissions for his stuff either. So
that sequence does capture it. But yeah, the sound of Blue Oyster Cult's Godzilla playing when they suddenly show this spot, and you're like,
yep. Mm-hmm.
oh my God, if you hit one of those things moving at the speed that they were going at, you were dead. Like,
No, there was
not injured, dead.
There was one scene where
Getting impaled on a fallen spike. It's fun.
let's make a horror movie about surfing.
Oh yeah.
Oh Jesus. Oh,
there was
that is going to be a gory ass movie.
Oh God.
There was a scene where two guys were headed for that slalom that you were talking about, Kat.
Yeah.
And one of them kind of went right in front of the other, and the other one ditched it right in front of one of those pilings. And I was like, oh, that guy got hurt.
Oh
That
God.
guy got hurt.
I was really surprised at how much film footage and photographs there were. Like I know at a certain point, what was it? Stasek.
Yeah, Craig Stasek. By the way, Craig Stasek
going around and like documenting this, but it seemed like there was stuff from even before that. I'm just like, Jesus, this must have taken a lot of work
and this is back
to
in the days
find
when
this,
8
all
millimeter and
this
6
footage and all
millimeter.
these photos from people who, they're not actually interviewing. Like there has to be other stuff out there.
Yeah.
That must have taken a lot of work.
Well, that
Yeah.
and Craig Stesick now actually has a permanent installation at the Smithsonian Institution. Like he's really gotten way up there. That's the impact of that
Damn.
culture. But if you think about it, this is shooting with 35 millimeter cameras, 8 and 16 millimeter film cameras. This is long, long before even like a beta camera existed in a commercial sense. And the level of documentation in this is absolutely amazing because they don't really double down on any shots.
No, I didn't notice one of the tricks that you see in a lot of the lower budgeted sort of niche documentaries that are like, for a sports thing or a fan thing is repetitive shots. And I didn't notice any.
Yeah.
When they were showing all of the original Zephyrs, there was one guy, only one member that they didn't have an old shot of or any video of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
not applicable. I kept waiting for someone to tell a story about how someone took like an incredibly bad dive, either surfing or skating, or he got caught up in that life, man, and died of an overdose. But
Yeah.
I don't remember anybody saying anything about that.
I didn't hear any stories about any major injury.
They seem to be building toward either one of those kind of stories with the one.
Yeah.
I apologize.
Okay, Adams.
I guess so. Yeah. And and I was thinking, oh, this is going to be, something terrible happening.
If anything, he kind of reminds me of Daniel Johnston. Somebody who loves what they do, but has no capacity to be able to handle the business end of what they do.
It seemed less fun to a lot of them after it started becoming a big money enterprise and magazines and things like that. There was the one guy who was really good at navigating that. The rest of them just wanted to keep skateboarding. So
yeah, and I think that that's kind of like there's a level of discipline and a level of drive necessary to do that, and I think Stacy Peralta and Tony Alva both had that. Tony was mostly driven by, a monumental ego. I mean, I think even he will admit to that. But
I think he may have. When they were talking about like that first big article with him in it, and it was selling skateboards, where one of them comments that like you look at that picture and it's not about skating anymore, it's about Alva. And just looking tough, and it's not about selling the skateboards, it's about selling the attitude.
Yeah,
sort of what happened with grunge when grunge hit big. Everybody was like really happy with grunge until Kurt Cobain's like now they're selling like flannel T-shirts at these boutique shops like there's some new thing. It's just the shit we were wearing.
Yeah, it's like it was the clothing you wore to survive being in the Pacific Northwest. Now it's a $300 shirt in the Gap.
Instead of $12, it's $300.
Yeah.
Right.
That's actually something that I wanted to touch on. I specifically chose this fucking T-shirt for the
I was
reason.
figuring
This was a gift. I would just like to say I don't really like pre-torn clothing as a general rule, because I don't like that it's basically ripping off counterculture movements and subcultures that didn't necessarily need to be commercialized.
But it's Kiss.
But it's Kiss.
Yeah.
You gotta love Kiss.
Yeah.
I know that Gene Simmons would approve because he would get a cut of this.
Hopefully
I don't do a very good Gene.
Hopefully, we get to do Phantom of the Park at some point.
But when they start doing those really low to the ground moves, and they talk about like the first time they started putting their hands on the pavement to kind of do those turns. I don't know what they're called, unfortunately. I'm not big on the skateboard technical lingo.
They call them.
You can see their jeans scraping up against the pavement, and then there's this one really great shot, like a photograph, kind of late on in the film, where just the back of someone's jeans are just totally shredded, like a big cat, like a tiger, just like,
yeah.
And you can see through to his boxers and everything. And I'm like, oh, God, so this is where it started. It's
yeah.
I've always hated it when I've always hated it when older folks, and when I say older folks, I mean people my parents' age, and as it's gone through the last 20 years, they say, well, why would you want to dress like that? Why would you want to dress like a homeless person? And I was like, first of all, fuck you, don't disparage those people. Second of all, like, you know, it's mimicking a style of stuff that's I guess I kind of had something of an idea back in the day when, you know, pre-ripped jeans were becoming popular. Like on the one hand, they're all soft and nice and worn in because you've been really physical in them, but without having to do the physical part. But then on the other hand, you've got all these rips in it, and that's what it comes from. It comes from doing a fucking nosedive off the edge of a pool that's been emptied out, and you've just torn your clothes to shit, but you got to get back up and do the thing again.
You know, and that happens so often to things that emerge as trends because because they're popular with people, and you know, some, you know, celebrities glomp onto it, and then it becomes something else.
Huge thing to me. It's like the end of this, the first wave of this era anyway, would be the Tom Petty video for Free Fallin'.
Yeah. It was interesting because you actually show them at a point where everybody is now beginning to have that level of success, Peralta and Alva and some of the other people. And they're hanging out. Like there's some pictures of them with like Joe Perry of Aerosmith and various other, you know, kind of like 70s icons at that particular point in time. And you said it's got to be kind of weird. And I don't know how that would mess with my head as a teenager to suddenly find myself existing in that same space as people who are like legit rock stars.
Yeah.
You know, that has to be something that completely warps your worldview for quite a while.
So one, I wouldn't even say complaint, but okay, I will. I did give this a press play. I do like it, but there's a complaint I have, and I'm going to lodge it formally. For the first 25 minutes,
bring it to the council.
Yes, I approach the council with humility, and I just want to let everybody know that
what is the complaint you have about the film we have just watched?
For the first 25 for the first 25 minutes of this movie, I was getting pissed because there's not a shot of this film that lasts more than 3 seconds, and everything is zooming
just
in,
moving all the time.
Like Michael Bay, like closed his eyes and just was hitting buttons.
But I think part of that is also the very early days of this. There wasn't that much documentation, so you had to go, okay, we're going to take this and then we're going to do an artificial zoom and Final Cut to make sure that it looks a little bit more dynamic, because motion is really fucking key to getting all of this right.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's present throughout the entire movie, whether it's panning over still shots or like fucking with the playback speed of the interviews.
But I like the way it settles once it starts settling into the story. Yeah. Then it plays like a, you know, then the edits are more organic. But in that first 20 minutes, it felt to me like the kind of video you pick up at a tourist shop where, ooh, we're doing this, we're doing that. So that right when it started to get to the point where they were like breaking into houses to go into their pools, that's when it started to settle down. I'm like, oh, okay, I can get into this.
Yeah. For it was only the first like 7 minutes for me. And I actually, like, after like the first 2 minutes, I actually considered turning it off because it was starting to freak me out. And I pushed through it, but it only lasted about 7 minutes for me.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Dave, you were the one who suggested this. I'm curious, were there any, you can call them complaints, you can call them didn't like it as much as whatever you want to call them, but whether it was like a film technique or a documentary technique, or just something about the way that they laid out the story that didn't hit you right?
To me, I think that there's a lot of glossing over, especially the things of like whatever with the exception of like Jay Adams or some and his story. There's elements of the personal cost that I think I would have made for more interesting storytelling, and how it is that, you know, you've got kind of like your principles in this. Stacey, I have to actually give Stacey Peralta a lot of credit on this one, in that he doesn't make it a film about Stacey Peralta, because it could very easily be. And the fact that he focused more, it's very obvious to me that Jay Adams is his hero. and that Tony Alva is also a hero, but somebody who drove him nuts.
Mm.
Like, we all have that person.
They
you're
were
like,
trying to keep it very civil.
the two you get, because they were competitors for years, both in terms of being skateboarders, but also business. But to me, I think that the focusing on them and not branching it out, because I would have liked to have seen there was a female member of the Zephyr team, Peggy Oki. I
Yeah,
would have
Peggy
loved
Oki.
to have fucking heard her story. More of her story.
she's
Yeah, right?
barely in the movie, and then at the end, I'm like, wait a minute, she can get her whole own documentary by herself.
Yeah, no, I'm actually I have her Wikipedia page up right now, actually. And that's actually one element that it felt like it. I mean, I guess what they wanted to go for was like, okay, here's how we went from sidewalk surfboards to the first real big what's the word I'm looking for here? See, this is what happens when you have one sip of beer. Don't drink, kids.
Important.
I need to-
destroys your brain.
I'm gonna have just
And
a little
the
more.
first big surge of skateboard as a culture, with the Z Boys and everybody who was getting into it at that time, and then up to like Tony Hawk, which most people watching the documentary when it came out, which what was it, 2001, 2004,
Yeah,
somewhere around there.
2001,
Yeah, that's where they would have been coming from to watch it, unless they were like a hardcore skater and like knew everything about it because they subscribed to the magazines, because magazines were still a thing in the early aughts. But one thing that I was kind of curious about, like, yeah, I see a handful of guys with Spanish last names, and a handful of people who are probably have our Pacific Islander heritage, and Peggy, and I think it was Jeff Ho.
Jeff Ho,
Jeff Cho.
the surfboard maker.
Yeah. Both of them seem really cool. But the ones that got focused on the most, and of course the ones who enjoyed the commercial success, seem to be just the white guys. And like they even said, like there was nobody like Alva. Nobody was as creative as him. He could fuck up in the middle of something and turn it into something that was artful on the back end of it.
Is that the 13-year-old kid that they were?
No, they're talking about
No.
Jay Adams.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. They were talking about
Oh,
Jay.
trust me, it's easy to get those two.
And throughout the movie, I want to go. There wasn't enough time because we had to set up to film, but I wanted to go back and find out. There was one guy who was black that had like just a quick clip. I don't remember seeing or hearing from him,
Yeah,
except for that one point in the movie. I wanted to find out who he is and like what his connection to the story is, whether he's just a skating fan or a surfing fan.
Might have ran for
Or,
number
if he's part of one of the surf shops, was a professional skater at some point.
There was one guy, I can't remember his name, Dave, you probably do. He was a surfer, the African-American guy. He was a surfer who actually kind of was the inspiration for all of the Zephyrs, kind of low to the ground.
Ron Bertelman.
What was it?
Ron Bertelman.
Okay.
Yeah, Bertelman.
Thank you.
Because that's where they
and
got
he
the
was
term
the one-
Bert from, is the idea of doing what they referred to as a Bertelman turn, where he would be coming up the front face of a wave and then do a sudden sharp cutback.
Yeah,
Bert
and
slide.
they were all saying that's what they like. Their dream was to be able to do that.
Yeah.
On a skateboard, and they kind of really mimicked his his low to the ground, touching the waves, where they started touching the pavement and using it as a pivot point and all that kind of stuff.
I think the set piece of the movie, really, aside from all the swimming pool chicanery, is the when they go to that contest and everybody else is doing this very formal skateboarding shit, and they just come out there and they're
He's
like
like fucking
Blasting it out. Also-
that was the exact moment when everybody realized that everything had changed. Like all the other people were like, okay, well,
It's also my favorite
It's new and
soundtrack
different.
moment in the film, because you've got all of these kind of like shiny happy doing the old 60s moves, skateboarding moves, and it's this kind of like almost mall music playing in the background. And then you hear the opening chords of "I Want to Be Your Dog" by
Right.
Iggy and the Stooges.
Oh,
You're like,
oh yeah.
oh, this is about to get real, or very, very real. It was like the best. Like, there's a lot of great music cues in that, but that one fucking killed
That was
it.
a
It
really
did
good one.
job.
Yeah.
I can't remember if that coincided or prefaced or was just after. There's this one shot where they were saying like, you know, all these like classically riding skateboarders. There's this one kid with like very perfectly appointed 70s hair.
Yep.
And I think is like he has a number tag on him, so he's clearly one of those skaters. And he just looks like annoyed as fuck, like looking around at them like, who do they think they are? This isn't skateboarding. Get out of here, you peons.
Yes.
And they
How
only
dare you
did,
walk in here with something
You
I don't
low-class brutes.
understand.
well, they didn't make first place or anything. They
Except for Peggy. Peggy
Oh,
got first place
Peggy came
in
in
the women's
first. Oh, she did.
freestyle.
Oh, cool.
I love that they included that little bit where she was like, you know, people were complaining to the judges that she was skating too much like a boy, and then the judge told them like she skates a lot better than some of the boys.
Yeah. See, I would love to see a story of some of the women
Very
who were
gracious
involved in
pride
that
there.
scene at that point, Peggy Oki and a few of the others. And, you know, because at that point it was very much a boys' club. So trying to get into that without, you know, getting the tag of being a groupie or a hanger-on or something like that,
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
being involved would make for a great fucking story. I'd love to see that.
Mhm. Was she the only
Well, and I'm
female
sure-
of the group? Or?
She was
I think-
the only one, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure it had something to do with the fact that they all kind of started as like a gang that was surfing together.
Yeah.
And I still think back then surfing was a little bit more of a boys' club, but I think it was like a little the lines were a little less harsh.
There seems to be a very strong exclusivity amongst them. I think, although I think it's more geared toward performance than anything else, but they're all
if you can show your stuff, and especially if you can survive skating that, or not skating, but surfing that spot in Venice,
Mhm. Yeah.
you're made. You're totally made at that point.
You know, it's interesting. I watch a little bit of the modern longboarding stuff, and if you watch any of that stuff, you'll notice that it's the women that are the really kind of groovy longboard dancers. You know, I don't know if you've seen any of those.
They got style. They got moves.
Yeah, and that's what they were talking about. What skateboarding was becoming back then was it was all about style. You know, they corrected each other and you know, gave tips on that. But nowadays, you know, all I kept thinking is, if you were to take one of these women from today that does this amazing longboard dancing and all that kind of stuff and put them back in that situation, they would have been like worshiping her like a goddess.
Oh yeah. Well, and it did seem like there was, you know, competition amongst them, but it was I wouldn't even call it friendly competition. I don't know. It was something beyond friendly competition. like you weren't just razzing on your friends. You were wanting them to get better so that they would push themselves, so that you could keep pushing yourself.
Mhm.
And like it, at least, you know, as many things are in the beginning, seemed very pure.
Mhm.
Yep.
And even though, you know, like I'm sure there was there was some of the whole sexism thing going on that's just kind of ingrained in American society that you can't really get away from. But it seemed that this might be one of those places where a little bit of that was kind of the rough edges of that were sanded down, and it became a little bit more about like, what can you do and can you look good doing it?
Yeah.
That and also how loyal you were to the rest of the group. I think that had a little bit more weight than it might in other spaces.
Well, it was something that they talk about when they were talking about going out and skating pools, that you had to, before you brought anybody in, you had to have a meeting. And it was kind of like, you know,
just
almost,
bring people here.
yeah, it was like a meeting of the commission in New York, where in order to get anything done, you had to talk to the rest of the team and go, hey, is it cool if I bring this person over here? Because you want to make sure that that person is cool, want to make sure that they're not a narc. and that they're going to be strong enough that if the cops bust us and they get you, are you going to keep your fucking mouth shut?
Yep.
And
it can't be like a majority vote. It has to be a consensus.
yeah.
So it's like a slightly gentle gangster situation.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that they didn't walk out and cap anybody, but I'm sure somebody probably got their ass kicked at least once for bringing somebody on the team that they didn't want.
They were talking about.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say there's no speculation about that. They straight up said like, no, we pounded on a few people.
Also one of my favorite stories, thinking about local spots and things like that, is still when they're talking about the Venice surf spot, and like somebody showed up that nobody knew, and somebody literally rides up to the guy, pulls up the carburetor from his car and goes, "Hey, does this belong to you?" and then drops it in the ocean.
I don't remember. Was that story in the movie? I don't remember.
It's in the
that was
movie.
in the movie.
Okay.
That was great.
I think I missed that.
Yeah,
Oh
that's
god, go
really-
back. This is one of the reasons to go back and
How cool is
like,
that?
I don't know how many times I've seen this film, but it's got to be at least 20. One of the things I love about this film is the energy of it, and for me, it's like a wayback machine of being the spectator of watching all the kids who are older than me having way more fun than I was. And to me, that's a lot of the energy of it, but also it's the idea of, and we can all relate to the various elements of, it's a crew of people who do a thing that nobody else gets. The music is absolutely amazing, and there's a creative element to everything that everyone does. It's like one part thug element and one part creative element, and to me, that's always where the best part happens.
It couldn't have been cheap to get Sean Penn to narrate this.
I'm pretty sure that somewhere along the line, Sean said, "I'll do it basically for scale," just because I think there's a lot of people who will come forward and say, like, they've got Henry Rollins and they've got Ian Mackay and a bunch of other people doing interviews in this, talking about the impact of Zephyr.
There was a member of Pearl Jam somewhere in there. I don't know.
Yeah, Jeff Ament.
Was Jeff in there?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
For a hot second.
Spicoli, just having Spicoli on a surf movie, I guess it's a
thankfully he didn't do the Spicoli thing. Also, I love that there's a moment in there that fits this so perfectly where Sean starts talking, he's like halfway into a sentence, clears his throat, and they kept that take.
Yeah.
I love that.
Oh, I forgot about that. It's like, okay, I was thinking, okay, that's kind of lazy, but then I was thinking, no, that's actually very in keeping with their mythos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I literally did have to clear my throat there. As someone who has been nowhere near this culture my entire life, it was really interesting to watch. The only thing that I come away wanting is a part 2, because I want to hear more about the people themselves and their lives, in particular people like Peggy Oki, so that I can learn more about where they're coming from and what they got out of skating, even if it was just like, what, man, it was fun. It didn't have to be anything more than that.
Yeah.
I want to hear more about the people themselves.
Okay. But
press play.
Okay. John?
Well, yeah, I went into this thinking, a documentary about skateboarding. Sorry, Dave.
That was cool. That's what part of the reason I did it is when I got handed the film, that was my exact reaction.
Well, that's kind of the idea of this show, is just to get us all to watch things that we wouldn't normally.
Broaden your horizons.
Yes.
So in retrospect, however, I never really knew. I mean, I knew that there was competitions and all that, X Games and all that kind of stuff now, but I you know what? Now that I think about it, I think my brother used to ride skateboard, once in a while and stuff like that. But so it was an extremely, wow, that wine's hitting me. Extremely interesting film with a kick-ass soundtrack and very interesting, unique people. And while I didn't think I would be interested in it, I was actually, kind of sad when it ended, because I felt like there could have been so much more even, and I would really like to see a whole, yeah, like a part two, exactly.
Mhm.
But mainly about the women that were in this, because there were, but I want to see what their connections and struggles and triumphs and all of that were related to this whole counterculture. You know, because that story is very rarely told, and I think that that makes for a very interesting story. But as far as this movie is concerned, I say press play. um you know, even if you know you're going into it thinking it's a documentary about skateboarding, but honestly, I really enjoyed watching it. You know, it was not like, you know, watching Endgame, or, you know, it's not that kind of movie.
It's
You
not
know,
like Endgame at all. No.
it's not. It's
Hey,
not.
if you're a cool person and you like to hang out with cool people, give it a watch.
Yeah, exactly. It's just one of those. You know, watch it because it's something you haven't seen before, and because
Yeah.
it's a culture you haven't probably learned about before, and it's a really interesting culture. And you know, I grew up in the 80s, not the 70s. If I had grown up in the 70s, I probably would have been skateboarding, to be very honest with you. Dave grew up in the 70s, but
Yeah, for me, it's definitely a press play. It's a reminder of all the things that I got to kind of watch as a kid going, God damn, I want to do that. And then
Yeah.
I never really got the opportunity to do that. But I love the energy of it. I love the creativity of it. I love how they use the archival stuff that they've got in a really creative way. This is one of those ones where it's a documentary that I can just sit there. Like there's a like this one and some of Stacy's films on the days when I'm kind of like crapping out and I'm just really tired or depressed. I can put on Dogtown and Z Boys or Bones Brigade or Writing Giants, and I feel better about the world knowing that there are people out there willing to try stuff that I never would have thought of, and then thought, no, wait, that looks really cool. And even if I can't do it, I love watching you do that.
It's cool that it exists.
Yes,
Mhm.
So press play, I'm assuming.
yes, definitely press play.
I've watched it so many times, but you know, after the 207th, I've kind of just
this
decided,
200
At 21, I was still press play. At 22, fuck this movie.
yeah, I'm not
I'm
watching
done.
ever again.
I have no prior knowledge of skateboarding. I had no knowledge of this or no knowledge of its connection to surfing. Um,
Me either.
Right?
so that was kind of
That
interesting.
in and of itself is just really cool to learn about.
Yeah, if I were to make the movie, I would have made the entire movie about the criminal aspect of breaking into people's houses
Yeah.
and just you know, like surfing in their pools. Hey, I was gonna joke, you know, if they want to break into my bedroom and clean it up so they can surf in it, well, I'll let them do whatever.
I'd be good with that. Yeah.
You live in a
But,
pool?
well, I may as well.
Oh,
But so it's not my niche. It's not something that I would have normally watched. I think there's enough interesting stuff in there that if it is your thing, that you're going to enjoy it, you should definitely press play. So
And if you're on
I
Spotify,
press
check
play.
out the soundtrack because
I-
Oh, hell
wow,
yeah.
there's so much good shit in there.